Hello and welcome back to the Scale Modelling Cafe, and welcome to the final part of the Kotare Spitfire. So you've just seen a shot of the final model and I'm going to show you how I got there. Now you'll notice straight away that I'm not showing you how I've done the basic camouflage. Essentially it's just Geosci Krios and some MRP and all sprayed freehand, and I've shown that many times, so I just wanted to concentrate on the markings and the weathering. Painting the red, this is MRP RAF markings red, and I gave it an undercoat of the dark earth, mainly because it's a little bit too red, but even then I still thought it was a little bit too red, so I mixed some of the dark earth in with the paint eventually and darkened it down, but this is the initial attempt. Putting the dark blue mask on first so I know exactly where to put the centre red, and that mask will go down, and then we'll peel off the outer mask and then spray the blue. And this is a little bit of departure from me. Normally I'll spray the markings first, or at least the red anyway, and then paint the blue, but I thought I'd go try a different technique this time and paint the markings over the top of the camouflage. I think it worked out rather well actually. So just laying down the MRP markings blue, and then I'll go in and I'll fade and shade that later. And the big reveal, has it worked? Yes it has, get in. You can see the shading effects there on the blue. And that is the advantage of masks over decals. Now here I'm shading a bit of the blue, and you'll see I've lifted a little bit of the paint off there, off the ammo cover. I went in later and I fixed that, and I fixed the tone of the red at the same time. Underside slightly more complicated, being three colours. So here the white is going down, masked off the area where the red's going to be. And what was also more complicated was all these lumps and bumps. So I used a little bit of thought here and sort of went in, did a bit of white, did a bit of red, did a bit of white. This one's worse because of the bigger lump and bump. So as you can see here, the white's been masked off, the red has been sprayed and masked off, and now I'm going in with the blue. The white lines you can see there are just so I can line up the mask. Hopefully try and keep everything nice and concentric, and that is always the risk with these, is getting things out of register. But yeah, these white lines certainly helped. The big reveal on this wing, off comes the red, off comes the outside mask, and there is a really nice mask, or painted marking rather. Like I say, a little bit more complicated on the other wing because of this bump, so when I designed the mask I designed in the little cutout for that to help, but I had to go in a few little touch-ups here and there. So just finishing off the touch-ups here. Just peel off the inner one. And again, really pleased with how these turned out actually. Now with the white, and as you'll see in just a second, I had a bit of a faux pas. Yeah, fingerprint in the wet paint. allowed that to dry, sanded it down and reapplied. And in this view, the red has been put on. And I'm just undercoating the area for the yellow because it's very translucent colour. So again, all paints are MRP. I'll paint the yellow and then I'll mask off the yellow. And the final colour will be the blue, which you'll see in a sec. So here's the yellow going down. Got to make sure it's nice and opaque. This is the marking yellow from MRP. Nice colour, slight orange tinge to it, so it's not a lemony yellow. But before I do the blue, I thought I'd tackle the serial number at the back. A little bit complicated with some of the numbers there, a 0 and an 8. So it's important to get the register. Now, with all the weathering I'd done and the varnish coats and everything, it did fade away, or not entirely, but I wasn't really pleased with the final result. So I ended up going back over again in a bit more of a darker black. But for now, this is NATO black with a few drops of black in there. And again, I'm lifting up some paint. Now this is happening, I think, because I didn't clean the model with isopropyl, which I normally do. Yeah, so risky business not cleaning it with alcohol, and I'm definitely going to do that in my models from now on. Got to be careful not to scratch the paint here with the tweezers. And I think that's turned out rather well. See there, the tail fin's done as well. And then the final part, as I just mentioned a little bit earlier, is doing the blue. Not too much fading here on the fuselage sides, so you're going to get more fading on the top of the wing, obviously. Again, just being very careful not to scratch the paintwork. Can't resist giving it a rub with the finger. But there we are. I'm really pleased with how that's turned out. Squadron codes next, medium sea grey. All designed on my software. And Affinity Designer 2, and then cut out on my Portrait 3, and yeah, lined up, stuck on, sprayed, removed masks. It really is quite simple. The long thin decals are absolutely notorious for getting a bit of a wobble in, so I decided to spray them out with masking tape and out with the MRP again. And you'll see when I remove the masks, I actually cut up some of the rounder masks just to get that curve just where the black walkway is. Good shot there of the wing chipping. Wing root chipping, I should say. That was done with a hairspray technique. Not overly successful, actually. I wasn't that pleased with it because I forgot to do the matte varnish over the metal, so the hairspray beaded up a bit. So I did go in with a brush and touch that in. But anyway, the wing walkways were a big success. Very pleased with how they turned out. And there we are. That's all the markings and spraying complete now, and I think that looks great. Much better than using decals, I think. Some might say an unnecessary gloss coat, but I do prefer to put down a gloss coat before I'm doing the decals. Just a few stencils to apply. My gloss coat of choice is Gunze GX100 Super Clear Gloss. You do need to thin it a lot actually and build it up in a few wet coats, but you can see how glossy it is when it goes down. Quite a high air pressure. Don't want any orange peel. I want to put it down relatively wet, let it level, and then let it cure. And then we can put the decals on, which performed superbly. I think they were Cartograph, if my memory serves me correct. Backing up the hairspray chipping, I used a bit of a sponge here and there, and then backed that up with a fine brush. This is Ammo Steel, which is still my favourite actually. It's quite a bright colour and depicts the aluminium really well. Steel, the sort of alclads and things like that, steels can be a little bit dark, but the acrylic from Ammo is actually a really nice tone and I really like it. Just doing some scratches as well, a few little dings here and there, and then the subsequent weathering is going to tone all this down as well. So even if you think you're going a bit over the top, don't worry, everything else is going to sort of blend it down. You can see there, that gloss is gone, and that's because I've used VMS satin varnish over the top and left it a good 24 hours to cure. I've had it sort of rub off in the past, but not here because I let it cure for, like I say, at least 24 hours. Quite subtle actually, but quite a nice effect. Now the oil work, and on with a sludge wash, although this is a bit thinner than my normal wash. And the reason I made it a little bit thinner is because I'm going over a satin coat, and normally I'll do the sludge wash over a gloss coat, but I thought I'd try it over a satin coat this time just to see how I got on, and actually I was very pleased with how it turned out. And literally just slather the wash absolutely everywhere underneath, and then we'll let that dry, and then we'll polish it off with some kitchen towel in a sec. I'm also going to do the lighter areas of the markings with this as well. So this is like it's a mixed up colour, like a warm grey. And the trick is not to get too much contrast. If you get too much contrast, yeah, it's just going to look artificial. Not forgetting the markings. And just going along some of the detail here. So there's some recessed detail there, some panel lines, some raised rivets. So we want to capture all that. Right, so we'll let that dry. You can speed things up with a hairdryer, which is what I tend to do actually. And then you've got to make sure it's all completely dry, otherwise this isn't really going to work. You're just going to spread the wash around, but when it is dry you can just polish off the excess. And with the satin varnish there's a bit of bite there, and it kind of stains it slightly. And I got this really nice effect, especially on the markings. It looks quite subtle there, but worked really well. I was really pleased. A little bit of a thicker wash on the upper surfaces, and one size does not fit all, so you'll see there a different tonal variation in over the green and over the brown. So this is a very dark green going over the dark green, and a lighter tone and a more browner tone going over the dark earth. And again, same thing, we'll let that dry and then we'll polish all that off. You see there I've avoided the markings or the roundels, and really trying to avoid getting it on the sky as well, because otherwise the contrast is going to be too great. Oil dots now, a whole load of ammo oil brushes, and I'm just going to dampen the surface with a bit of thinner, and then using this small brush I'm just going to put the tiny dots of oil paint everywhere, trying to use a little bit of thought. So darker tones in the recesses, around panel lines, nooks and crannies, lighter tones around the centre of panels and on the high spots. And then we'll just go in with this damp brush and we'll just blend everything in. And the good thing about using oils is you can actually manipulate the oil paint, move it around, and it's really versatile, and I really like using oils. Gives some great effects, and like I say, you can manipulate the colours, go back in, if you don't like it, take it off, reapply it, and yeah, as I said, gives a really nice effect. You can see how sort of dirty it's looking on that area where I've been using the oils already. Cordite stains now, and quite prominent on Spitfires. Just gone in with very dark tone, and not quite black, a sort of very dark browny black. And then we'll just use the brush to get that where we want, streak it back, and then we'll go in when that's dry with a dry brush, and we'll just do a little bit more blending, because at the moment it's a little bit sort of too stark, too harsh, and just using the dry brush, that'll blend it quite nicely, get that sort of smoky effect. I thought it was a little bit too much over the roundel here, so just wetted a brush with a bit of thinner. And then this is what I meant about manipulating the oils. You can sort of move it around, clean up areas, and I'm just trying to get it into the panel line there, which worked quite well. And then we'll let that dry off. And then we can go in with the dry brush and do a little bit of blending again when that's dry. So I've done the oil dots on the top. I didn't film it again, but I thought I'd just show you this. So I'm just using a little bit of a sort of really quite thick wash here, just to accentuate some of the panel lines. So blending first with a damp brush and then with a drier brush, and using a sort of tapping motion, brushing motion, and we'll blend that in. Again, I don't want too much of a contrast here. Don't want dark lines over everywhere, but around the engine cowlings certainly got quite grubby. Quite prominent were the fuel stains over the fuel tank. If you look at period photos, you'll see this kind of sort of blended streaking effect. So I used light and dark tones to simulate that. And so initially over the fuel tank cover itself, quite blended, sort of faded effect, and then you can see this streaking where the fuel has run along the panel line and then gone down again, so you get this kind of double effect on this lower panel. This is sort of dust and flesh tones, and then I'll go in with a darker tone and just do the outside. So when you look at the period pictures, it's almost like the dirt sort of collects on the outside of the stain, if that kind of makes sense. So we'll blend these two tones together. Don't want it too stripy, but again, references are your friend, so just tidying it up there on that lower panel. because that sort of wing root bit was sort of relatively clean looking at the pictures. And there's a final effect, a bit shiny, so we'll tone that down with a bit of varnish. Now this is great fun on Spitfires. Some of them were absolutely mired in oil streaks underneath, and this is relatively restrained looking at some of them. But just drawing on the oil paint initially, letting it dry for about an hour and then streaking it back with a wet flat brush. And now just to put everything together. So the wheels are keyed actually, so you can't get them the wrong way around, which is good because the flat spot is kind of towed in, and they just slot in. I did remove a little bit of the mounting lug in accordance with the instructions, and that helped a lot. So that just slots in. Tail wheel just slots in as well. These are the exhausts, the resin exhausts that arrived just in time. I've got a separate video on these, so I'll link that at the end. Prop just pushes on. That's been weathered with acrylics actually, which is a bit of a departure for me. And then the canopy, and that's it. It's pretty much done. I've really enjoyed this project. Relatively simple kit for what it is, but beautifully detailed and some great attention to detail. So I'll just leave you with some final reveal photos, and I'll see you on the next project. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye bye.